everyone. Welcome to Orthokeratology with Paragon CRT contact lenses. My name is Leah Johnson, and I'm the Director of Global Professional Services at Paragon Vision Sciences. I'm responsible for the development of clinical and education programs supporting current and future eye care practitioners. In addition, I also serve as clinical adjunct faculty at the University of Houston, where I assist in the clinic for myopia management services. Today, we are going to review the general process of orthokeratology, otherwise known in shorthand as Ortho-K. We will review the process and how it works to reshape the cornea to reduce refractive error, then learn about the parameters of CRT and CRT dual axis and what makes it such a unique lens. Finally, we will end with a case report to practice on how to integrate these new learnings to one of your future patients. So let's review the very basics of the overview of Ortho-K. A myopic patient applies his or her Ortho-K lenses prior to bedtime and sleeps in the lenses. While sleeping, the lenses gently reshape the curvature of the cornea so that the central cornea is flattened to reduce myopic refractive error. And when the patient wakes up, the lenses are removed so that the patient can enjoy clear vision without any corrective wear during the day. Ortho-K lenses reshape the cornea. So let's begin with reviewing corneal anatomy. The cornea is approximately 540 microns in total thickness, but Ortho-K mostly affects the epithelium here, only changing about 10 microns of thickness from the center to the mid-periphery. So if we're wondering what happens on a cellular level, here's a diagram of normal corneal epithelial cells. And when a patient wears an Ortho-K lens, it causes central corneal compression, as you can see here, and the fluid in the central cornea moves to the mid-periphery. Here are some histology slides from Pacific University with Dr. Chu and Patrick Caroline. And while these photos are of a cat cornea, it helps give a general idea of what happens to the epithelial cells post-Ortho-K lens wear. So the picture here on the left shows corneal epithelium prior to Ortho-K lens wear. And the photo on the right shows the corneal epithelium after Ortho-K lens wear. As you can see, we have central compression, and the extra fluid then goes to the mid-periphery to increase thickness. So as we delve into the mechanism of Ortho-K, we now know that the lens works by hydraulic forces in a closed eyelid environment. There is a positive push force in the center of the lens, and as that fluid is compressed by that positive push force, it is then balanced by a negative pull force out in the mid-periphery. There's more space of the lens between the lens and the cornea in the mid-periphery, and so that fluid moves from the central portion to the mid-peripheral portion of the cornea. And thus we get central corneal flattening and mid-peripheral steepening. So here we have a pre-treatment topography map of the eye, and we see a fluorescein video of the Ortho-K lens on the eye. If we look at this fluorescein video, we notice that in the central treatment area, we have a darker zone, and the lens is actually not touching the cornea, but there's about 5 to 10 microns of space and fluid, posterior fluid, that is underneath the lens, between the lens and the cornea. And then we see the fluorescein pooling out in the mid-periphery, and it forms a nice fluorescein green ring. And then we have 360 alignment out in the mid-peripheral and peripheral portions of the cornea. So changes begin to happen rapidly with even minutes to a few hours. However, if it's a decent night of sleep, about 7 to 8 hours, we're going to see more of a bullseye pattern on a post-treatment map of topography. Blue indicates flattening of diopters and flattening of the central cornea, along with red, which indicates the steepening of the mid-peripheral portion of the cornea. So why choose Paragon CRT as your first choice in an Ortho-K lens? Well, Paragon CRT was the very first Ortho-K lens to be FDA approved for overnight wear. Our lens is sold in over 50 countries around the world with an astounding record of efficacy and safety. And in a recent survey of over 300 Paragon CRT patients, over 97% of those patients said that their experience with Paragon CRT either met or exceeded their expectations. Ortho-K lenses not only correct myopia, they also enhance a patient's quality of life. In that sense, we are proud to say that with Paragon CRT lenses, we don't just change vision, we change lives. Paragon CRT's FDA approval is both for our lens material, which is HDS 100, and the lens design, which is Paragon CRT, and Paragon CRT dual axis. At Paragon, we have the highest range of US FDA approval for any Ortho-K lens, up to 6 diopters of myopia and up to 1.75 diopters of astigmatism, both with the rule and against the rule. And there are no age restrictions for wear of these lenses. So let's discuss CRT parameters. The parameters are easy to adjust. We only have 3 parameters for you to learn. The first is the base curve, or the central optic zone of the lens, and this sets the mold for the treatment. In the photo here, it is the gray schematic that you can see in the superior portion of the fluorescein portion of the eye. You can see the darker central treatment zone. The second parameter is the return zone, or as we call in shorthand, RZD, which stands for return zone depth. This is the major player in terms of centration of the lens. We can see in the schematic it is the dark purple, which correlates to the fluorescein pooling in the superior portion of the lens. The last parameter is the landing zone angle, or LZA, and this controls the edge lift of the lens. This is demonstrated by the blue coloring, and we can see that it has a nice wide 360 band, or actually 180 here from the photo. So the last thing to note here are the numbers at the 12 o'clock mark. You see a 7-9, 5-3, 33. What do these numbers mean? Well, one unique feature of Paragon is that we are completely transparent in our parameters and have them laser marked into the return zone depth. So if you have a CRT sphere lens, there will be just one section of laser marks. The first 2 digits indicate the base curve. The second 2 digits indicate the return zone depth. However, the return zone depth is actually indicated in 3 digits of microns for sagittal depth. So we round these digits to the nearest 2. For example, in this picture here, we see the middle 2 digits are a 5-3, and that 5-3 actually stands for a 525 micron depth for sagittal depth. The last 2 digits are the landing zone angle. Here you see a 34, and that indicates the LZA. One important thing to note is that identification will appear reversed when the lens is on eye, and that is because the laser marks etchings are etched inside the RZD. So when viewing the lens on the eye, the numbers will appear backwards. Just to introduce briefly CRT dual axis parameters, now you can, if you look carefully, you can see that there are 2 laser marking sections on the lens. There's one in the upper left RZD portion and one in the lower left RZD portion. So the secondary lower left RZD portion actually stands for an RZD2 or an LZA2. We'll discuss a little bit later on in dual axis lenses, but I wanted to introduce the concept here in the beginning. So this is also a schematic of a CRT dual axis lens with laser markings etched inside the RZD. You can see as before, it's similar to the spherical lenses where it has the first 6 digits representing the base curve, the RZD1, and the LZA1. However, with a dual axis lens, there will be 2 sets of laser markings. The second block represents the RZD2 and the LZA2. Once again, don't worry, we'll discuss more about these parameters later on in this lecture. One important thing to note is that Paragon CRT and CRT dual axis are the only orthokeratology lens designs where the parameter changes are independent of each other. Base curve changes do not change the fit of the lens, as in other types of GP or Ortho-K lens designs. The base curve is only for the myopic correction. Our RZD is a sigmoid curve and can be changed independently from the base curve or other curves of the lens. Lastly, we have a landing zone angle, and this also can be changed independently. In addition, you can have two parameters customized at 90-degree meridians, so you can have an RZD1 and an RZD2, or an LZA1 and an LZA2. So when we're fitting the cornea, it's important to know the corneal diameter. The standard CRT lens diameter is 10.5. So if you don't request a diameter for your lens, it's going to come in a 10.5 millimeter. The diagnostic fitting sets are also in 10.5 millimeter. But your CRT lens diameter should be adjusted to best fit the patient's corneal size. At Paragon, we recommend to subtract 1 millimeter from the corneal diameter size and round to the nearest 0.5 step. For example, this patient here on the left, their corneal diameter is measured at 11.38. You can see it in the little hot pink box. If you subtract 1 millimeter here, you're going to get 10.38. So our recommended diameter rounding to the nearest 0.5 would be a 10.5 millimeter lens. If we look at this patient on the right, we see their corneal diameter size is a 12.06 minus 1 millimeter, and you get 11.06. Therefore, the recommended diameter size is 11 millimeters. What happens if a lens is too small for the cornea? It will decenter laterally, as you can see here from this video. So the base curve provides the mold for the treatment for the myopic correction. It is measured in millimeters of radius and measured in 0.1 millimeter steps. The base curve is calculated from the lens calculator, taking into account a patient's flat K values and their manifest refraction. There is an additional 0.50 diopters built into the base curve calculation, also known as the Jessen factor, and that helps with regression throughout the day, as Ortho-K is a temporary process of corneal reshaping. The base curve is never adjusted to change the fit of the lens. So when do you know when to change the base curve? When the patient's subjective refraction over the lens, otherwise known as the ROL, is not 20/20, and the patient does not have a +50 to +1 ROL. So what does that mean? Well, when a patient is wearing their CRT lenses, they should be able to see 20/20 through the lenses. Then, check the refraction over the lens, or ROL, refraction over lens, and perform a subjective manifest refraction, or an autorefractor is okay. But the refraction over the lens, or ROL, should be +50 to +1. So here are some examples that we're going to discuss on when we would want to make a base curve change. Do you remember GP laws of SAM-FAP? Steepen a base curve, add minus. Flatten a base curve, add plus. The same rules apply here to Ortho-K. If we want to add plus to the targeted refraction, we want to flatten the base curve. If we want to add minus to the targeted refraction, we will want to steepen the base curve. So let's take a look at some examples to put this into action. Let's take this patient example. The original base curve for this patient is an 8.8. Our refraction over the lens, or our ROL, is a +150 for them to see well 20/20. Our target ROL is a +1. I'd recommend a +1 target for children and young adults. So we'd want to steepen by half a diopter to achieve the targeted ROL of a +1. A 0.1 millimeter change is equivalent to half a diopter change. So by steepening the base curve by 0.1, we are achieving a half diopter minus change in that ROL. So we would go from an 8.8 base curve to an 8.7, which is 0.1 millimeters steeper. Now, what happens when the ROL is less than plus 50? This is actually quite more frequent than an ROL having too much plus. When the ROL is less than plus 50, that means there's not enough treatment and we need to flatten the base curve to adjust. So let's take, for example, a patient has an 8.6 base curve. And to help them reach 20/20, they have an ROL of half a diopter of minus. They have half a diopter of minus, and our target ROL, let's say here, is plus 50. So we're going to need to change by a whole diopter, and we want to flatten the base curve by 0.2 millimeters to achieve that diopter change in the ROL. So what will the new base curve be? 8.6, if we flatten by 0.2, will be an 8.8 base curve. Our secondary lens parameter to discuss is the return zone depth, or the RZD. It is the parameter that mainly controls centration. It is measured in sagittal depth of 25 micron increments. A 600 micron RZD is much deeper of a lens compared to a 500 micron RZD. As you can see here in the diagram, 600, 575, 550, as the numbers are lower and lower, or the lens becomes shallower and shallower. So a 600 micron lens is 100 microns deeper than a 500 micron lens. As you can see, the lens becomes closer to the cornea as the lens is shallower. So let's take a look at changing RZD parameters. In the photo here, we see a nicely centered CRT lens on the cornea. If we decrease the RZD by 25 microns, the lens becomes too shallow to fit the cornea, and the lens will decenter upwards. Thus, when we see that the lens with the superior decentration, we actually need to increase the RZD in 25 micron step increments to center the lens. Oppositely, if we increase the sagittal depth of the lens too much, as something that you see here, from 550 RZD to a 600, there's too much fluorescein, and the depth between the lens and the cornea, you can see there's a very small central treatment zone with an insertion bubble. And if we saw this lens, we would know we want to decrease the RZD by 1 or possibly 2 steps to achieve the nicely centered lens as seen in the middle. Okay, so here's another video. Let's look at this and what is happening. This patient has an RZD of 550. And as they blink, for a split second, we see a bullseye pattern with that nice 360 alignment in the mid-periphery. And then as the lens settles on the cornea, we see that there is leaking or fluorescein leaking at that 6 o'clock mark. So what do we need to do here? Well, here's a schematic, and the arrow points to the 6 o'clock mark that has the leaking. Here's a static image as well to show that we don't have a nice 360 alignment of this lens. So what we will want to do is to raise the RZD2, or that vertical meridian, by at least 50 microns. Many times when lenses are superiorly decentered and do not have that nice 360 mid-peripheral alignment, it's due to the RZD2 of having insufficient sagittal depth. This is the very same patient with a dual axis lens on the eye. We have a 550 in the horizontal meridian and a 600 for the RZD2 in the vertical meridian. So let's take another look here. This is a well-fitting CRT lens on the eye. This is the lens with toricity, and we see that we're not getting a nice 360 alignment. So if we increase just in that one meridian, we're going to have a nice alignment now, 360 degrees. So in the horizontal meridian, we have an RZD of 500 microns. And then in the vertical meridian, we actually increase the secondary RZD2 by 50 microns for RZD2 of 550, and that's how we're going to achieve that nice 360-degree alignment. So when should we use a CRT dual-axis lens? I'd refer to the amount of toricity on the cornea. For corneas with 3/4 or more difference between the flat and the steep K, we want to start off using a 50 micron depth difference lens between RZD1 and RZD2. For a cornea greater than a diopter and a half of corneal toricity, you'd want to start with at least 75 microns of depth difference. You can customize CRT dual-axis lenses and 25 micron steps between the RZD1 and RZD2, and lens depth differences can be created up to 200 microns. So once again, here is a quick video summarizing a Paragon CRT spherical lens on a toric cornea. As you can see, we don't achieve complete 360-degree alignment in the mid-periphery, and therefore we want to use a CRT dual-axis lens with 2 RZD depth differences. And that secondary RZD2 with increased sagittal depth helps give us that nice 360-degree landing. Okay, and the last parameter to discuss, the landing zone angle. This controls edge lift, but also contributes to the overall sagittal depth of the lens. The landing zone angle, or the LZA, is measured in angles or degrees. So the higher the degree number, such as 34, is actually a steeper angle. That means there's less edge lift. A 1 degree increase in the angle or edge lift is going to increase the sagittal depth of the lens by 15 microns. Oppositely, a lower degree angle, such as in the diagram of 31, means that it is flatter and has more edge lift. So a 1 degree decrease in the angle is going to decrease the sagittal depth by 15 microns. We can also have dual landing zone angles for toric peripheral corneas such as limbus to limbus astigmatism. So the ideal LZA is one of there's about 1 to 2 millimeters of fluorescein underneath the edge of the lens. For our purposes today, this is the landing zone angle of 33. If you have too wide of a fluorescein pattern due to a flat edge, the tangent point of the cornea is too far from the lens edge. So the lens will be too loose and move excessively. This is the example you see in the photo with a 32-degree angle for this cornea. Conversely, the tangent point of a cornea is too close to the landing lens edge. There is no tear movement under the lens as it's too tight and will not move on the cornea. There will be problems with the lens adhering to the eye when the patient awakens and potential complications of SPK and staining around the lens edge. This is as in the example of the 34 landing zone angle. So to increase edge lift and to allow more tear movement underneath the lens, we would want to go from a 34 to a 33. When a patient's peripheral cornea exhibits toricity upon fluorescein evaluation, a dual-axis landing zone angle is also recommended to provide a uniform landing zone. Typically, patients with more limbal-to-limbal toricity, such as displayed on this topography, will need a dual landing zone angle. And you can create dual LZAs with 1 to 2 degrees of difference. For example, do you see how the arrow here points to a thicker edge lift in the vertical meridian in both the 6 and 12 o'clock than the horizontal meridian? So this patient here is wearing a symmetrical LZA of 32. But if we steepen the LZA2 to become a 33 or maybe even 34, that's going to help tuck in that vertical meridian to become more comfortable for the patient and to have a uniform landing zone, giving a better end result. So the patient is in your chair. How are you going to fit them with Paragon CRT? What do you actually need to fit your patient and order your first set of lens parameters? Well, the first set of data that you will want are your auto-Ks, your manifest refraction, corneal diameter size, and topography if available. It's great to have a baseline topography map and the ability to compare changes after corneal reshaping. You must be CRT certified. Don't forget, to dispense and prescribe CRT lenses, you must have an FDA-approved certification. So, the first thing you will want to do is download our lens calculator. Here's a video to show you how to do that, starting with Google. So you will want to type in, first of all, Paragon Vision Sciences. And you'll want to go to the practitioner site in the green tab. Go under Resources, and you'll scroll down under all our different resources until you reach the lens calculator. You'll want to click Download Now. And once you download the lens calculator, it will be saved as an Excel file on your computer, in which you can go to that file and type in your patient's parameters. There you go. That's your lens selector. So let's take a quicker look at how, once you have the lens calculator downloaded, you'll want to input the patient's flat and steep Ks along with their manifest refraction sphere. The calculator is for myopia, so you don't need to put a minus as it's already calculating for the myopic refractive error. As you can see, once you put in the flat and steep Ks, the parameters for the CRT lens will populate. Depending on the corneal toricity between the flat and steep K, you may have a CRT lens, or if there's greater than 3/4 of diopter of corneal toricity, the calculator will recommend a dual axis lens. Here in the circle are the parameters that we will want to start off with. So let's go through a patient case. We have a 7-year-old female who has been diagnosed with myopia the year prior, but her vision wasn't that poorly, and this year her vision has progressed some more. So her activities include being on the swim team, being on the gymnastics team. She doesn't spend that much time outdoors, but she does perform a fair amount of moderate near work. Her ethnicity is Asian, and both her parents have high myopia. Her parents have also mentioned that they want a modality in which they can be hands-on and involved in the care of their daughter's contact lenses. Due to Melissa having swim or water activities, along with her parents' wishes to be hands-on, we decide we're going to go with Ortho-K. So she was starting to be myopic last year, and this year she has a new refraction of a -2, -3/4 sil, about with the roll cylinder. Her left eye is a little more myopic at -275, -150 sil. When we look at her K values, we see that she has about a diopter and a quarter and a diopter and a half of corneal toricity. And when we measure her corneal diameter size, we measure 12.3 and 12.1. So instantly, when I subtract -1 millimeter from her HVID, I know that I want to have her start off at least an 11.0 millimeter lens. So we put her flat K and her steep K parameters into the lens calculator, and we see that the CRT lens calculator calculates 8.1, 550, 600 RZD, 1 for RZD2, and a 34 landing zone angle. So we order these exact same lens parameters, and we order them in 11.0 lens diameter size. For the right eye, we decide to do red for right. For the green eye, we'll do green, or for the left eye, we'll do green. So what does a follow-up examination look like? Well, after we dispense the lenses, on day 1, when she returns, we want to see the lenses on eye, and we want to check the visual acuity and perform a refraction over the lens. What do we want our refraction over the lens to be? +50 to +1. Once again, we want to perform a slit lamp examination and evaluate the centration and fluorescein pattern. So, for our child, we have our follow-up visit. She sleeps in the lenses and comes back the next day. We check her manifest refraction, and now she's a -50, with a little bit of cylinder, and in her left eye -3/4 with also a little bit of cylinder. We check that refraction over the lens, and while she sees 20/20 with the lenses on, we see that her ROL is +50, so we don't want to change anything. Below is a picture of her left eye's post-topography treatment map. And we notice that we have a nice centered bullseye pattern for this patient. So on day 1, even though her manifest refraction sphere, when we examine her lenses removed and we check that visual acuity, even though she's not plano, that's okay because this is her 1-day treatment. We tell her to continue with lens wear and we'll see her back in 1 week. So we have her come back in 1 week, and now her right eye is plano and her left eye is about +1/4. So this is very acceptable in terms of the vision we are trying to achieve for 20/20 vision. Her refraction over the lens, once again, is a +50. So this patient was wearing Paragon CRT dual axis lenses. And any patient with corneal toricity greater than 3/4 of a diopter calls for a dual axis lens. But really, even for patients who are borderline between spherical or dual axis lens, a dual axis lens will lead to a faster onset. We have studies showing that it leads to 50% faster reduction in myopia. Dual axis lenses optimize centration with that increased sagittal depth in the RZD2. It also maximizes reshaping efficacy. To top it all off, it helps maintain a long-term treatment consistency throughout the year that the patient wears their Ortho-K lenses, especially patients who may have subtle corneal toricity. And that wraps up our discussion today on orthokeratology lenses and Paragon CRT. If you are not yet CRT certified, go to our website at paragonvision.com/ECP and click on Get Certified. Once you click on there, you can go through a series of learning modules reviewing myopia, the mechanism of Ortho-K, Ortho-K lens parameters, similar to what we've reviewed here, but much more in depth with parameter changes and more troubleshooting. Thank you everyone for attending. If you have further questions or want more information or just want to talk to an amazing or kind person, please reach out to Fernando Bolio. He's in charge of Latin America marketing for Paragon Vision Sciences, and his email is below. Thank you again.